I never thought I would be telling this story. And yet here I am. I'm 45, divorced for a few years, living a life that's quiet. Too quiet. My days are predictable. Work, errands, a couple of friends I meet occasionally. I told myself I didn't need more, that love was a chapter behind me. But then Emily walked into my life. I met her at a small dinner my friend hosted. She was there casually elegant, not trying to impress anyone, yet somehow commanding attention. Her laugh was soft, but full of warmth, her eyes calm yet penetrating. I remember thinking, how can someone look at the world so openly, so fearlessly, and still carry a kind of mystery? At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself she was off limits, she was my friend's mother. After all, that was a rule, wasn't it? Some invisible boundary you never cross. Yet, every word she spoke, every gesture, made the boundary blur. We started talking after the dinner. At first, about trivial things, books, movies, the kind of conversations that barely scratched the surface. But gradually, we found ourselves discussing deeper matters, regrets, past losses, dreams that had never been spoken aloud. I hadn't realized how starved I was for someone who would truly listen. One evening, I found myself laughing at something she said, and she laughed too, but not the polite laugh you give someone you barely know. It was genuine, shared, the kind that makes your chest warm and your heart race. I told myself, it's nothing, just a connection, harmless. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Days passed, and I began noticing small things, how she tilted her head when listening, the thoughtful pause before she spoke, the way her hands moved when she explained something. Each observation drew me in further. I found myself looking for excuses to see her again, even just for a brief conversation. Then came a night I won't forget. A quiet evening, just the two of us talking about life, our lives. She spoke of her past, of moments she regretted, of dreams she hadn't dared to pursue. I listened, captivated, and when I spoke, I realized I was sharing parts of myself I hadn't voiced in years. Vulnerabilities, fears, longings, she heard them all. And in that moment, something changed. A subtle glance, a pause in conversation, a touch of her hand on mine. It was fleeting, almost accidental, yet it carried an intensity I couldn't deny. My mind screamed, don't, but my heart whispered, stay. Since that night, our interactions grew more frequent. Coffee, walks, late-night calls. Nothing explicit, nothing beyond a tender closeness. Yet every moment was charged with tension. I wrestled with guilt and desire. How could I feel this way about someone I wasn't supposed to? How could I betray the invisible rules that bound me? Yet, despite the fear, there was joy. A sense of aliveness I hadn't felt in years. In her presence, the quiet routine of my life faded, replaced by moments of connections so vivid I could hardly believe they were real. By the end of those first few weeks, I knew I was no longer just observing Emily. I was falling for her, quietly, dangerously, irresistibly. And that realization terrified me more than anything. As the days turned into weeks, Emily and I began spending more time together. At first, it was innocent coffee, brief walks, casual conversations. But the longer we were together, the heavier the tension grew. It wasn't just attraction, it was something deeper, something almost terrifying in its intensity. I found myself analyzing every word she said, every glance, every pause. Was she feeling it too? Or was it all in my head? The guilt gnawed at me constantly. This wasn't just about me, it involved my friend, her daughter, our social circle. Crossing that invisible line felt like walking on a razor's edge. And yet, every interaction pulled me closer. We began sharing personal stories that we hadn't told anyone else. I spoke of my divorce, the loneliness, the quiet despair of routine life. She shared her own regrets, the love she lost, the dreams she had set aside. In these conversations, I felt a connection that went beyond desire. It was understanding, empathy, a meeting of souls. But the fear was always there. Every time I thought of acting on my feelings, a voice in my head whispered, "This is wrong. You're betraying your friend, crossing lines you shouldn't." And every time she touched my hand or laughed at something I said, another voice countered, "This is real. This is what you've been missing. Don't let it go." One evening, after a long day, we ended up alone, walking through the quiet streets. The air was cool, the sky dark, and the city seemed to fade away around us. We talked about our pasts, our fears, and I realized I hadn't felt this seen, this understood, in decades. Her hand brushed mine, almost by accident, but I didn't pull away. My heart raced, and I felt a shiver run through me. I wanted to speak, to confess the feelings I had kept locked inside, but fear stopped me. Fear of judgment, fear of betrayal, fear of losing something fragile and precious. The next weeks were a delicate dance. We kept our interactions subtle but meaningful, a touch here, a shared glance there, conversations that lasted hours into the night. Every moment was charged with emotion, yet we remained careful, aware of the risks. Then came a moment that changed everything. She looked at me, really looked, and I saw in her eyes the same struggle. I felt the longing, the fear, the undeniable pull between us. She whispered, almost shyly, "I feel the same way." I froze. The words hung in the air, heavy with consequences. I knew from that instant that nothing could be the same again. I wanted to retreat, to run back to safety, but my heart refused. In that moment, I understood something fundamental. Love doesn't ask for permission, and it doesn't care about rules. Yet the moral dilemma remained. Every choice carried risk of betrayal, of judgment, of heartbreak. Every smile, every gentle touch, felt like stepping further into forbidden territory. And still, despite the fear, despite the guilt, I couldn't turn away. I wanted her, needed her, in a way I hadn't realized I could. By the end of that chapter in my life, I was fully aware of what I had done. I had crossed a line in my heart, even if my actions remained cautious. And in doing so, I had stepped into a world of uncertainty, passion, and moral complexity that I could never return from. After Emily's words, everything changed. The unspoken tension that had existed between us became undeniable reality. We could no longer pretend that this was just a fleeting connection. Every glance, every conversation, every small touch carried meaning. But with clarity came fear. I had crossed a line in my heart, and now I had to confront the consequences. What if someone found out? What if my friend discovered the truth? What if I ruined relationships that had been precious to me? Every possibility seemed to hang over my head like a storm cloud, and yet the pull toward her was irresistible. We began meeting in secret, careful not to draw attention, yet fully immersed in the moments we shared. Our connection deepened beyond simple attraction. It became a profound emotional intimacy. I learned things about her that she had never told anyone, and she listened to my fears, regrets, and dreams as if they were sacred. One evening, as we sat in her quiet living room, sipping tea and talking about life, I realized that love had a cost. It demanded honesty, courage, and the willingness to face judgment. I knew that to fully embrace this love, I had to confront my guilt, my fear, and the social rules I had lived by for decades. And so, I made a choice. I chose to acknowledge my feelings openly, at least in my own heart, and to accept the uncertainty that came with them. Every moment with her became precious, not just for the passion it stirred, but for the emotional connection that nourished my soul. Yet the dilemma persisted. Each day I questioned myself. Am I betraying my friend? Am I selfish for pursuing this love? The questions were relentless, gnawing at my conscience, but every time I looked into her eyes, Every time we shared a smile or a quiet laugh, I knew the answer. I was not acting from malice or deceit. I was following something authentic, something that made me feel truly alive. There were moments of doubt, of course. I imagined scenarios where everything went wrong, accidental discovery, harsh judgment, even rejection. But each imagined outcome could not diminish the truth I had found in her presence. Love, in its purest form, was worth the risk, worth the moral conflict, worth the fear. As the months passed, our bond strengthened. We learned to navigate the delicate balance between desire and propriety, between passion and restraint. And through it all, I discovered something about myself. Courage doesn't mean the absence of fear, it means acting in spite of it. Now I stand here, confessing to you strangers, unseen yet attentive, what I cannot fully reveal to the people in my life. I am in love, deeply and irrevocably, with someone I wasn't supposed to love. I am aware of the risks, the potential pain, the moral ambiguities. And yet, I would not trade what I feel for anything. So I ask you, the ones listening, am I the asshole for following my heart? For embracing a love that defies the rules and expectations? Or am I finally living honestly, after decades of caution and fear? I leave you with that question, because I do not have an answer, only a life being lived in truth, emotion, and passion, one moment at a time.